Hello everyone. Here is the presentation of Group 4 discussing Lesson 8, Employee Separation and Retention, and Lesson 9, Pay Structure Decisions. After discussing Lesson 8, learners are expected to distinguish between involuntary and voluntary turnover and discuss how each of these forms of turnover can be leveraged for a competitive advantage. List the major elements that contribute to the perception of justice and how to apply this in the organizational context involving discipline and dismissal. And lastly, specify the relationship between job satisfaction and various forms of job withdrawal and identify the major sources of job satisfaction in the work context. I am Darina Clazel M. Layug, and I will be introducing employee retention plans and discussing managing involuntary turnover and voluntary turnover. Turnover or employee turnover is one of the major concerns of organizations and businesses of all sizes. This refers to the event in which an employee leaves an organization and have to be replaced. There happens a loss of talent in the workforce over time through employee departure, resignations, terminations, retirements, or even deaths. Employee turnover also refers to the measurement of the cycle of hiring and firing employees that happens within an organization. It is one of the most important metrics in data-driven recruiting. A company is said to have high employee turnover rates when their employees routinely leave or are fired, resulting in the need to hire again. The turnover of employees incurs direct or indirect costs such as recruitment cost, lost knowledge, advertising cost for new position, and orientation and training costs. To avoid these expenses, HR strategic plans must include employee retention plans. These retention plans outline the strategies that the organization will use to reduce the turnover and address employee motivation. Some of the retention strategies and considerations are salaries and benefits, training and development, and performance appraisals. To begin with retention planning, the organization must first understand some theories on job satisfaction and dissatisfaction and gather data as to the satisfaction level of the employees. Job satisfaction and dissatisfaction theories will be discussed by the next reporters. Moving forward, employee turnover has two types, which are voluntary turnover and involuntary turnover. Voluntary turnover is any instance in which an employee actively chooses to leave. This can happen as a result of better job opportunities elsewhere, conflict with the workplace, disengagement, and more. The second type of employee turnover is involuntary turnover, and this happens when an employer chooses to terminate an employee or remove him or her permanently from the job, probably because of poor performance, toxic behavior, and other reasons. To manage the increase of voluntary turnover, the organization must prevent employees who are highly valued by the organization from leaving. Here are some ways to manage and reduce voluntary turnover. First, create an environment that encourages trust and communication. To achieve this, the organization must give its employees new tasks or greater responsibilities with their current task for them to feel that they are trusted and they are competent enough to complete the assignment. Another way to reduce voluntary turnover is by giving employees a goal and recognizing a job well done. Third, invest in training employees. The company may provide professional trainings and tools that the employees need to succeed. If an outside training or a new office equipment is needed to increase efficiency, make the investment. This action on the part of the company makes the statement that employees are valued. When people feel appreciated, they are more apt to stay. Fourth, remain competitive with other companies. Voluntary turnover can arise from an opportunity for a better job. Companies must examine benefits package and make it equivalent to or better than similar companies to reduce turnover. Also, companies should look at what they are paying their employees, determine whether starting salaries are competitive, and whether promotions and raises are in line with or better than competitors. Lastly, see to it that you do not overburden or stress out your employees. On the other hand, when an employer initiated an involuntary turnover of an employee due to poor performance or violation of workplace, the employee being fired sometimes sued the employer for wrongful discharge. That is why discharging an employee is a very difficult task that needs to be handled with utmost care and attention to detail. A wrongful discharge claim typically attempts to establish that the discharge either violated an implied contract or covenant, that is, the employer acted unfairly, or violated a public policy, that is, the employee was terminated because he or she refused to do something illegal, unethical, or unsafe. This means that in almost any instance, when someone is fired due to poor performance, the alternative possibility that the person was a victim of discrimination can be raised. Employee turnover is natural for any organization. While low employee turnover is the goal for most organizations, what determines low versus high turnover is how actual turnover compares to a typical or expected rate, which can change depending on industry, job type, company size, region, and more. And that rate is very rarely zero. What companies can do is to at least reduce the turnover of employees by hiring the right people, offering competitive pay and benefits, giving encouragement and recognition, showing the career path, allowing flexible work schedules, and assessing their management. That would be all for employee turnover. Next, reporters will be discussing principles of justice, theories on job satisfaction and dissatisfaction, and job withdrawal. Thank you for listening.
Hi, good day. I'm Beverly Ruth C. Ibay, and I'll be the one to present and discuss the following topics: principles of justice, progressive discipline and alternative dispute resolution, employee assistance and wellness programs of Lesson 8, employee separation and retention. Have you ever been part of a work situation where you thought you were treated unfairly? If so, did it have an impact on your work or morale? Employees want to work for fair and ethical in companies and be treated with respect. In principles of justice, individuals should be treated the same unless they differ in ways that are relevant to the situation in which they are involved. So we define organizational justice that concerns employees' perceptions of fairness within a company. As we noted earlier in Chapter 8, outcome fairness refers to the judgment that people make with respect to the outcomes received relative to the outcomes received by other people with whom they identify. Justice and fairness are closely related terms that are often today used interchangeably. Clearly, a situation where one person is losing his or her job while others are not is conducive to perceptions of outcome unfairness on the part of the discharged employee. The degree to which this potentially unfair act translates into the type of anger and resentment that might spawn retaliation in the form of violence or litigation, however, depends on the perceptions of procedural and interactional justice. I'll first discuss what is procedural justice. So we define procedural justice as a concept of justice focusing on the methods used to determine the outcomes received. It means to say it is concerned about creating policies and procedures that take all perspectives and concerns into consideration. Procedural justice affects how decisions are made and policies are established in a company. Procedural justice suggests that decisions be neutral, based on facts, and appropriate for the actions. So this puts a burden on companies to create procedures and policies which demonstrate procedural justice, meaning the person will be fair and consistent regardless of who is involved in the situation. So in procedural justice, there are 6 determinants. These 6 key principles determine whether people perceive procedures as being fair. First, consistency. The procedures should be applied consistently across time and other persons. Second, bias suppression. The procedures are applied by a person who has no vested interest in the outcome and no prior prejudices regarding the individual. Third, information accuracy. The procedure is based on information that is perceived to be true or real. Fourth, correctability. The procedure has built-in safeguards that allow one to appeal mistakes or bad decisions. Fifth, representativeness. The procedure is informed by the concerns of all groups or stakeholders affected by the decision, including the employee or the individual being dismissed. Sixth, ethicality. The procedure is consistent with prevailing moral standards as they pertain to issues like invasion of privacy or deception. So even given all the negative ramifications of being dismissed from one's job, the person being dismissed may accept the decision with minimum danger if the procedures used to arrive at the decision are consistent, unbiased, accurate, correctable, representative, and ethical. This helps maintain his faith in the system as a whole even if he is unhappy with the specific decision that was triggered by the system. In general, the goal of an effective procedural justice process is that the person who is terminated knows exactly why this was the decision of the employer and he or she may be able to use the information to improve their chances at staying gainfully employed at their next job. Next, we have interactional justice. Have you ever had a job where your co-workers also treated you as their friends, and your boss or employer listened to your perspectives? Have you ever felt like you were discriminated against at your work? Whereas procedural deals with how a decision was made, interactional justice is a concept of justice referring to the interpersonal nature of how the outcomes were implemented. Interactional justice is the standard applied to how employees relate to each other at work. This is not just determining how managers treat their members, it can also relate to how coworkers and colleagues interact with each other. For example, when a manager is exercising interactional justice, she or he will promote an employee based on experience, merit, and performance. However, if a manager promotes someone because she or he is a friend, family member, or can help the manager personally, that behavior is a direct violation of interactional justice. Interactional justice has many applications in the workplace. It has a direct influence on how employers treat employees. There are 4 key determinants of interactional justice. First, explanation. We emphasize aspects of procedural fairness that justify the decision made. Second, social sensitivity. We treat the employee with dignity and respect. Third, consideration. We listen to the employee's concerns. And fourth, empathy. We identify with the employee's feelings. When the decision is explained well and implemented in a fashion that is socially sensitive, considerate, and empathetic, this helps diffuse some of the resentment that might come about from a decision to discharge an employee. As one human research director noted, the key is to ensure that the affected individual walks out with their dignity and self-respect intact. Going through these steps is especially important if the individual who is being managed is already high in hostility and hence a threat to respond in violent fashion. Some people see unfairness in every situation and react strongly, whereas others are more trusting, and this has to be recognized even when explaining procedures to different types of people. Interactional justice has a further impact as it affects how co-workers relate to each other. Next topic, we have progressive discipline and alternative dispute resolution. Except in the most extreme cases, employees should not generally be terminated for a first offense. Rather, termination should come about at the end of a systematic discipline program. So why do we need effective discipline programs? An effective discipline program is beneficial to both the employer and employee. It helps employees correct any shortcomings with the goal of becoming a valuable, contributing member of the workforce. Effective discipline programs have 2 central components. First, documentation, which includes specific publication of work rules and job descriptions that should be in place prior to administering discipline. Second, progressive punitive measures which allow an employee that displays improper or undesired behavior a chance to improve. Most large companies use some form of progressive discipline. Progressive discipline is an employee disciplinary system that provides a graduated range of responses to employee performance or conduct problems. All are based on the principle that the company's disciplinary response should be appropriate and proportionate to the employee's conduct. Using progressive discipline appropriately will also help your company stay out of legal trouble. Progressive discipline requires you to let employees know what you expect, to be fair, consistent, and objective in imposing discipline, to include employees in the process of improvement, and to document your actions and decisions properly. Thus, as shown in the table, punitive measures should be taken in steps of increasing magnitude and only after having been clearly documented. This may start with an unofficial warning for the first offense, followed by a written reprimand for additional offenses. At some point, later offenses may lead to a temporary suspension. Before a company suspends an employee, it may even want to issue a last chance notification indicating that the next offense will result in termination. Such procedures may seem low, and they may fail to meet one's emotional need for quick and satisfying retribution. In the end, however, when problem employees are discharged, the chance that they can prove they were discharged for poor cause has been minimized. At various points in the discipline process, the individual or the organization might want to bring in outside parties to help resolve discrepancies or conflicts. As a last resort, the individual might invoke the legal system to resolve these types of conflicts, but in order to avoid this, more and more companies are turning to alternative dispute resolution, or ADR, techniques that show promise in resolving disputes in a timely, constructive, cost-effective manner. Alternative dispute resolution can take on many different forms, but in general, ADR proceeds through the 4 stages shown in the slide. Stage 1. Open door policy. The two people in conflict, example supervisor and subordinate, attempt to arrive at a settlement together. If none can be reached, they proceed to Stage 2. Peer review. A panel composed of representatives from the organization that are at the same level of those people in the dispute hears the case and attempts to help the parties arrive at a settlement. If none can be reached, they proceed to Stage 3, mediation. A neutral third party from outside the organization hears the case and via a non-binding process tries to help the disputants arrive at a settlement. If none can be reached, the parties proceed to Stage 4, arbitration. A professional arbitrator from outside the organization hears the case and resolves it unilaterally by rendering a specific decision or award. Most arbitrators are experienced employment attorneys or retired judges. Each stage reflects a somewhat broader involvement of different people, and the hope is that the conflict will be resolved at earlier stages. However, the last stage may include binding arbitration where an agreed-upon neutral party resolves the conflict unilaterally if necessary. Whereas alternative dispute resolution is effective in dealing with problems related to performance and interpersonal differences in the workplace, many of the problems that lead an organization to want to terminate an individual's employment relate to drug or alcohol abuse. In these cases, the organization's discipline and dismissal program should also incorporate an employee assistance program. We define an employee assistance program as a referral service that supervisors or employees can use to seek professional treatment for various problems. It is a work-based intervention program designed to assist employees in resolving personal problems that may be adversely affecting the employee's performance. EAPs vary widely, but most share some basic elements. First, the programs are usually identified in official documents published by the employer. such as employee handbooks. Supervisors are trained to use the referral service for employees whom they suspect of having health-related problems. And employees are also trained to use the system to make self-referrals when necessary. The key to the effectiveness of an employee assistance program is striking the right balance between collecting information that can be used to promote employee health on the one hand and the employee's right to privacy on the other. Although financial costs are often the driving force behind these programs, one should not lose sight of the fact that the quality of life enjoyed by employees both on and off the job is also affected. That ends my report. Thank you for listening.
Good day everyone. For this section, I will be discussing the job withdrawal process, including theories about the manifestations of job dissatisfaction. Despite companies' best efforts in the area of personnel selection, training, and compensation systems, some employees will occasionally feel unsatisfied with their job. When events like this happen, employees will develop a set of behaviors in succession or progression to avoid their work situation. Job withdrawal is a set of behaviors that dissatisfied individuals do to avoid their work situation while maintaining their workload. Organizations always attempt to do a research on how to improve the productivity and satisfaction of their employees. However, frequently employees themselves withdraw from their work situation for many reasons. Withdrawal behaviors noticeable in the working environment includes absenteeism, worker turnover, delay or lateness, engaging in non-work related conversations, neglecting job tasks, and taking longer breaks than deserved. When employees work in teams or work groups, withdrawal behaviors can be infectious. Low job satisfaction is a major reason of employee withdrawal behaviors. Employees withdraw from their work in phases until reaching turnover. One of the basic theories of job dissatisfaction is the progression of job withdrawal theory. It is developed by John Farrell and James Peterson. It says that people develop a set of behaviors in succession to avoid their work situation. These behaviors include behavior change, physical job withdrawal, and psychological job withdrawal. Individuals try the next category only if the preceding one is either unsuccessful or impossible to implement. This theory also states that employees who are dissatisfied with a job or organization might not be able to just jump to another job right away, but instead, they either engage themselves temporarily with the phases of the withdrawal until the right opportunity comes along. Thus, job withdrawal behaviors are the manifestations of job dissatisfaction, and job dissatisfaction is brought by many reasons. Turnover, on the other hand, is the consequence of continuing dissatisfaction triggered by a certain event that pushes an employee away. The first phase of job withdrawal is the behavior change. A dissatisfied worker will try to change the conditions that generate the dissatisfaction. They are prepared and committed to make a change by trying to gather information about what they need to do in order to redress that specific source of dissatisfaction. It always leads to a supervisor and subordinate confrontation and conflict. Although this might seem a threat, this is also an opportunity for the manager to learn an important problem within the organization. And when it is properly channeled by a secure and supported leader, it often results in substantial organizational improvements and prevent further turnover among highly engaged and committed employees. When they fail to make an internal change, employees can initiate change through whistleblowing. Whistleblowing is a term used when a person passes on information concerning wrongdoings such as corruption, sexual harassments, and etc. This is also referred to as blowing the whistle, making a disclosure, and making a whistleblowing report. Whistleblowing is also the process of making grievances public by going to the media or other government agencies. The person or the whistleblower is usually closely associated with the organization and often a dissatisfied employee who cannot bring about internal change, and out of sense of commitment and frustrations, take their concerns to other external parties. If the job conditions cannot be changed, a dissatisfied worker may be able to solve the problem by leaving the job. Physical job withdrawal is a stage where employees exhibit actions that provide a physical escape from the work environment. The following are the examples of physical job withdrawal behavior. The first one is the internal transfer. It can be a promotion or reassignment. This happens when the dissatisfaction is job-specific, the result of an unfair supervisor or unpleasant working conditions. The second one is tardiness, arriving late for work or early departure from work. It shows lack of motivations to arrive at work on time. This is the result of having low job satisfaction, low job involvement, and low organizational commitment. The third one is absenteeism. An employee fails to report to work for an extended period of time and for excessive number of days without having an excuse. Examples of excused absences include medical appointments and pre-approved vacations. The fourth one is the turnover. It occurs when an employee leaves the organization. This may be beneficial or harmful to the organization depending on the trade-offs between cost of maintaining old employees and training new employees. When dissatisfied employees are unable to change their situation or remove themselves physically from their jobs, they may psychologically disengage themselves from their jobs. Although they are physically on the job, their minds might be somewhere else. Disengaged employees may show less involvement and commitment to the organization, which can create large costs for the company. Disengagement is a situation where people are physically present on the job but gradually stop being involved in any activity or organization for being emotionally and mentally detached and shows passive or incomplete performance. There are two forms of psychological job disengagement. The first one is job involvement. It is the degree to which people identify themselves with their jobs. People who are uninvolved with their jobs consider their work an important aspect of their lives. In this form, the primary dissatisfactions has to do with the job itself. The second one is the organizational commitment. It is the degree to which an employee identifies with the organization and is willing to put forth effort on its behalf. Individuals who feel they have been unjustly treated by their employer often respond by reducing their level of commitment and are often looking for the first good chance to quit their jobs. This can occur when the dissatisfaction is with the employer. So the following are examples of psychological job withdrawal behavior. The first one is daydreaming. This happens when an employee appears to be working but has a distracted mind and poor attention control over thoughts or concerns. The second one is cyberloafing. Employees who use their internet access at work for personal use while pretending to do legitimate work, or surfing the internet during working hours for personal use. The third one is moonlighting. It refers to the practice of working a second job outside normal business hours, or an employee having a second job in addition to his regular employment. Fatigue is another example of psychological withdrawal behavior that can affect one or more employees in a work group. It is a feeling of constant and progressive tiredness or weakness and can be physical, mental, or a combination of both due to dissatisfaction, depression, anxiety, and frustrations at work. It can become contagious, just like other negative behaviors in the workplace. That is the reason why it is necessary for the organizations to have strategies prepared to motivate employees and maintain positive attitude at work. The managers should also know about the importance of job satisfaction so they can avoid and seek ways to minimize job withdrawal behaviors. The next topic will be more focused on job satisfaction. That's all. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Sophia, and my topic for today is all about job satisfaction. Job satisfaction is defined as the pleasurable feeling that results from the perception that one's job fulfills or allows them for the fulfillment of one's important job values. So this definition reflects three important aspects. First, job satisfaction is a function of values, which is defined as what a person consciously or unconsciously desires to obtain. Second, this definition emphasizes that different employees have different views of which values are important. And it is solely for the reason that we are different people, so we hold different values that are important to us. So there is no standard to meet and able to say that you are satisfied with your job. Job satisfaction differs from people to people solely because we are all different in that level. The third important aspect of job satisfaction is perception. An individual's perception may not be completely accurate reflection of reality, and some other people may view the same situation differently. In particular, people's perception is strongly influenced by their frame of reference. A frame of reference is a standard point that serves as a comparison for other points and thus provides meaning. For example, a nurse is satisfied with her salary, but then she started comparing her salary to her co-workers who has the same job and they receive more salary than her. That's when the dissatisfaction occurs. So the frame of reference is really powerful in affecting one's job satisfaction.
Next, I will be discussing the sources of job dissatisfaction. One of the major sources of job dissatisfaction is unsafe working conditions. There is a high impossibility of retaining or attracting applicants or workers when their health and lives are at risk because of the job. Usually, jobs that pose safety risk are fishing boats operators, airline pilots or flight attendants, garbage collectors, and construction workers. The second source of job dissatisfaction is personal disposition, and this refers to a person's true character, attitude, or outlook. It is a person's tendency or habit to act in a certain way or perform an undertaking. Thus, turnover is more likely to be an issue for employees who are low in emotional stability, low in conscientiousness, or low in agreeableness. The next source of job dissatisfaction is task and roles. There is a strong positive relationship between task complexity and job satisfaction because boredom that is generated by simple, repetitive jobs that do not mentally challenge workers lead to frustration or dissatisfaction. Managers with poor leadership skills tend to offer little feedback on employees' performances, and not having the required leadership is another reason for dissatisfaction. Lastly, pay and benefits. If a person or an employee doesn't think that they are being paid enough to do their job, then they perceive themselves to be underpaid. And if they research for the wages for the job and find that they are indeed underpaid, then their dissatisfaction is warranted. That's all for Lesson 8. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I am Kimberly Godine and I will be discussing the overview about the pay structure decisions as well as the equity theories and fairness. Enlisted here are the learning outcomes throughout our group presentation. What we'll be learning in this video are mainly about employee compensation management, the areas, concepts, and administrative tools in managing compensation of employees, and the factors to consider in designing pay structures. We all know that a compensation is a pay provided by an employer to an employee in return for work. Pay is a powerful tool for furthering the strategic goals of an organization. It is said to be influential or important since it has a large impact on employees' attitudes and behaviors. It influences the kind of employees who are attracted to the organization. Setting a great pay level is necessary to attract a workforce more in line with the upcoming or future strategies of a business. Employee compensation is typically a significant organizational cost, and this is the reason why it should be observed and examined properly and carefully. Total rewards or compensation is a concept that describes all of the tools available to an employer that may be used to attract, motivate, engage, and retain employees. Total compensation consists of cash compensation such as salary, merit increases, bonuses, stock options, and this also includes benefits such as health insurance, paid vacation, and unemployment compensation. Again, total rewards, total returns include not only the total compensation but also any other non-monetary rewards. Examples of non-monetary awards are interesting or fulfilling work, good coworkers, development opportunities, recognition that are associated with the employment relationship. There are two areas in salary level decisions. These two are the pay structure and the individual pay. Out of these two, we'll be focusing on pay structure. In pay structure, we have two things which need to be considered: pay level and job structure. Pay level is defined here as the average pay including wages, salaries, and bonuses of jobs in an organization. Job structure refers to the relative pay of jobs in an organization. Consider the same two jobs in two different organizations. Both pay level and job structure are characteristics of organizations and reflect decisions about jobs rather than about individual employees. Let's now proceed to the topic about equity theory and fairness. Equity theory refers to the perceived fairness and outcomes we receive relative to our contributions and the outcome and contributions of others as we evaluate the fairness of our situations by comparing ourselves with those of other people. Equity theory highlights the statement that equity is not equality. Two employees who have equal contribution but they have unequal pay would likely be perceived as unfair. The same thing goes with equal pay for the works but they have unequal contributions would likely be perceived as unfair also, especially on the part of the worker who has more contributions. In equity theory, a person compares her own ratio of perceived outcomes to perceived inputs to the ratio of a comparison of other person. To fully understand this concept, let's have this example. P stands for person, for example, Yoshi. Small letter O stands for other person, for example, Yoshi's coworker. Big letter O stands for the outcomes. This is the compensation or the working condition of an employee. Big letter I stands for inputs, which are the skills and contribution of the employee to the company. In the first scenario, if the ratio of Yoshi is equivalent to the ratio of his coworker, it is said to be that there is an equity. So if there's equity, there is no change is expected in Yoshi's attitude or behavior. However, if Yoshi's co-worker's ratio is greater than his ratio, there is an under-rewarded inequity. If there is an under-rewarded inequity, it could result to the restoration of the equity through reducing one's own input by not working as hard than before or by increasing outcomes through theft, or he may also leave the company. And lastly, there is over-rewarded inequity if Yoshi's ratio is greater than the ratio of his coworker. So this inequity could result to restoration of equity again through reducing one's own input by not working as hard than before. But it is said that it is less likely to occur because Yoshi can reevaluate his outcomes less favorably. There are two types of employee social comparisons of pay, namely external and internal equity pay comparisons. In external equity pay comparisons, it explains that external competitiveness is a functional area and it refers to the pay comparison with competitors as it focuses on what employees in other organizations are paid for doing the same job. This has significant influence as this affects the current employee's decision whether to stay or not, as well as the applicant's decision whether to accept the job offer or not. On the other hand, internal equity pay comparison focuses on what employees within the organization but in different jobs are paid. This influences the behavior of the employees and their decision in accepting promotions or not. Due to these significant influences, organization must ensure that its compensation plan is internally aligned, externally competitive, and well managed.
Hi, so let's proceed to the second topic of Lesson 9 entitled Developing Pay Levels. So first we're going to talk about the market pressures. So we have two market pressures that we have to consider and pay attention to: the product market competition and labor market competition. So let's first discuss the product market competition. So we all know that in the market, there is always a competition and rivalry among companies, especially those who sell the same products and offers the same services. To compete effectively in the product market, they must be able to sell their goods and services at a quantity and price that will bring a sufficient return on their investment. Aside from that, they also compete on multiple dimensions such as quality, service, and prices. So, in other words, by understanding the terms market and competition, we can deduce that product market competition is where two or more companies or organizations strive to gain profit by competing with one another using various tactics. For example, to attract customers to buy your products, it must have a price that is affordable for them. And one of the factors that affect prices is cost of production. An organization that incurs high labor costs than its product market competitors will have to charge higher average prices for products with similar quality. Therefore, the higher prices can contribute to a loss of the company, since customer will most likely choose the company who offers lower prices. So the next market pressure that we have to consider is the labor market competition. So this market challenge reflects the number of workers available relative to the number of jobs available. So we all know that shortage or surplus of workers affects the pay levels. So for example, in a perfectly competitive market where a shortage of workers exists, companies, regardless if they offer the same or different products and services, will definitely compete against other companies to hire those limited employees available. This kind of competition among companies will require considerable pay to win over the skilled employees that they want. So, if an organization is not competitive enough in the labor market, then it will fail to attract and retain employees of sufficient numbers and quality. The next is employees as resources. So we discussed earlier that organizations have to compete in the labor market, but they should also consider their employees not just as a cost, but also as a resource in which the organization has invested and from which they expect valuable returns. Employees are considered as the most valuable assets of any company because it doesn't make a difference whether the product they produces is food, clothes, or cars. In the end, the one who is in charge of doing those products are employees. So basically, an excellent company reflects the excellent employees that it keeps. So going back, considering the competitive market, the organization's competitive position can also be compromised if costs are kept low at the expense of employee productivity and quality. In the end, we have to keep in mind that competition in markets is not just about the cost. So, having higher labor cost than your competitors is not necessarily a concern if you also happen to have the best and most effective workforce, one that is produces more products efficiently and with better quality. In deciding what to pay to employees, there's always ranges of discretion. However, how large the range is depends on the particular competitive environment the organization faces. Where the range is broad, an important strategic decision is needed to know whether to pay above, at, or below the market average. The advantage of paying above the market average is the ability to attract and retain top talent available and help generate positive job attitudes such as satisfaction, all of which can translate into a high effective and productive workforce. The disadvantage, on the other hand, is the added cost. In reference to what I read, according to the efficiency wage theory, the benefits of higher pay outweighs the higher cost when our organizations have technologies or structures that depend on highly skilled employees. To compete for talent, the organization use benchmarking. So this benchmarking is the practice of comparing business processes and performance metric from other companies. So for those who are wondering why benchmarking, benchmarking is a way of discovering what is the best performance being achieved, whether in a particular company, by a competitor, or by an entirely different industry. This information can then be used to identify gaps in an organization processes in order to achieve a competitive advantage. Next is, how will it be accomplished? Benchmarking against product markets and labor market competitors is typically accomplished through the use of one or more pay service. Sometimes companies have to ask themselves if they pay their employees fairly. And the perfect way to do that is by collecting market pay data since it provides information on going rates of pay among competing organizations. The use of pay service requires answers to several important questions. First, which employer should be included in the survey? Ideally, they would be the labor market and product market competitors. Second is, which jobs are included in the survey? So because only a sample of jobs is ordinarily used, care must be taken that the jobs are representatives in terms of level, functional area, and product market. Also, the job's content must be sufficiently similar. The third question is, if multiple surveys are used, how are all the rates of pay weighted and combined? Organizations often have to weight and combine pay rates because different surveys are often tailored toward particular employee groups or product markets. So the organization must decide how much relative weight to give to its labor market and product market competitors in setting pay. As we discussed previously, obtaining a single going rate of market pay is a complex task for every company as it involves a number of subjective decisions. Once a decision has been made and a market rate has been chosen, how will it be incorporated into the pay structure? The concept of rate ranges addresses the fact that different employees in the same job may have different pay rates. Therefore, the use of rate ranges permits a company to recognize differences in employee performance, seniority, training, and so forth in setting individual pays. The last topic that we're going to tackle is the key jobs and non-key jobs. Key jobs are benchmark jobs that have relatively stable content and are common to many organizations so that market pay survey data can be obtained. An example of typical key jobs would include department manager, controls engineer, administrative assistant, and so on. Non-key jobs, on the other hand, are unique to organizations and cannot be compared through the use of market service.
Hello everyone, I'm Precious Mary Joyce B. Malyari and I'll be continuing the report in topic Lesson 2, which is developing a job structure. What is a job structure? A job structure is the basic overall hierarchy that a business uses to manage the reporting structure for each of the positions within the company. There are 4 basic types of job structures, which is departmental, functional, geographical, and business unit. So the first one is departmental organizational structure, which works best in companies with clearly defined department units that focus on future expansion and growth. So this is the most basic type of job structure and the most common one. So what happens here is that each department has several managers and one executive that oversees the entire department. The second one is the functional organizational structure, which is common in smaller companies, usually those companies with less than 100 employees. This structure organizes the company according to the function and roles of each individual employee. This type of company also offers more bonuses and promotions to encourage the employee to have an improved performances. The third one is the geographical structure, which are typical for companies with regional branches. The advantage of this structure is that it allows each branch to have a specific goal. So, each individual branches usually have a different internal structure, which allows them for more flexibility in promotions and performance. The last one is the business unit structure, which is a unique structure type allowing the individual branches to focus entirely on different markets. So, an executive manager can run each unit independently in this structure. So this is an example of a job structure. As you can see, there are 2 managers, which is the production manager and the marketing manager. Since both of them are managers, you can expect that they are receiving the almost same amounts of salary because they have the same organizational levels with similar responsibilities, and they both have similar impacts in the organization's performance. Job evaluation. Job evaluation is the systematic process of determining the relative value of different jobs in an organization. The goal of job evaluation is to compare jobs with each other in order to create a pay structure that is fair, equitable, and consistent for everyone. It is composed of compensable factors and a weighing scheme based on the importance of each compensable factor to the organization. So in other words, compensable factors are the characteristics of jobs that an organization values and chooses to pay for. The point factor system. After generating score for each compensable factor and each job evaluators often apply a weighing scheme to account for the differing importance of the compensable factors to the organization. Weights can be generated in 2 ways, priori and empirical. Priori weights means factors are weighted using expert judgment about the importance of each compensable factor. The second one is weights that are derived empirically are based on how important each factor seems in determining pay in the labor market. So this is an example of a 3-point factor system. The factors are experience, education, and complexity. After totaling them, we've arrived at 110 for computer tech, 155 for programmer analyst, and 210 for system analyst. Since system analyst has the highest score because it has the highest compensable factors, therefore it has the highest salary among the 3. Structure. Pay structure define employee compensation for different jobs or group of jobs. They involve setting salary ranges and pay grades based on the market data and job roles. It is important to note that both internal and external comparison must be considered in making compensation decision because the pay structure suggested by the internal and the external comparisons do not necessarily converge. So therefore, employers must carefully balance them. It is suggested that the employers may differ significantly in the degree to which they place priority on internal or external comparison data in developing a pay structure. An example of pay structure, as you can see, there is job valuation, survey 1, survey 2, survey composite. As I said earlier, it is suggested for employers to place priority on internal or external comparison data in developing pay structure. In this example, survey 1 has a priority than survey 2 because 2/3 of survey 1 will be used as a basis in making a pay structure, while only one-third in Survey 2 will be used as a basis. So as you can see, the higher the job evaluation, the higher the amount or the salary will be. Market survey data. This is the approach with the greatest emphasis on external comparison and is achieved by directly basing pay on market surveys that covers as many key jobs as possible. For example, the rate of pay for job A would be $3,070 and the rate for job B would be $4,491 and for job C would be $6,614. However, in the job D, since there is no available survey information, we must proceed differently. Therefore, we will use a pay policy line for this job. Pay policy line. The second pay setting approach that combines information from external and internal comparisons is to use the pay policy line to derive pay rates for both key and non-key jobs. This approach differs from the first approach in that the actual market rates are no longer used for key jobs. This introduces a greater degree of internal consistency into the structure because the pay of all the jobs is directly linked to the number of the job evaluation points. Pay grade. Each job within a grade would have the same rate range. The advantage of this approach is that the administrative burden of setting separate rates of pay for hundreds or even thousands of different jobs is reduced. It also permits greater flexibility in moving employees from job to job without raising a concern about it. For example, if you're from a job having 230 job evaluation points to a job with 215 job evaluation points, what might look like a demotion in a completely job-based system is usually a non-issue in a grade-based system, simply because as long as you are within the range, the amount of salary will also be the same. That's all. Thank you.
To continue the report of our group, I am Bianca Janine Maikes and I will be discussing the third topic under the pay structure decision, which is the importance of the process, participation, and communication. In this topic, we must know the relevance of participation and communication in making decisions regarding how the company will pay or compensate their employees. Generally, when we talk about participation, it is the involvement of a person in making decisions that will greatly affect his or her life. In order to participate, a person should be willing to contribute something based on his knowledge and experience that is material to the decision that will be made. Through participation, people can identify opportunities and strategies for action and can come up to alternatives when plan did not work out. It is very similar when we talk about the participation in pay structure decisions. When the organization's top management is performing changes to the payment or compensation structure, the employee's voice regarding the matter should be heard and be given importance, because the compensation given to the employees will have an impact on their performance and attitude on the workplace, and also their loyalty on the organization. Next, we have communication. In human resource management, the communication is used to relay information from the top management down to the employees and vice versa. The information pertains to the company policies, goals, objectives, and certain changes. Effective communication increases productivity, which benefits the employees and the company as a whole. When employees are given the right to communicate, they can perceive equality inside the organization. They can perceive that they are valuable to the company like the people on the top management. Management plays great role in the communication process inside the organization, especially regarding pay structures. They should be willing to explain why the payment structure of the organization is designed in that way. They should also be ready to provide the employees the information regarding changes when. For the last topic under Lesson 9, I will be discussing the problems related to job-based pay structure and the possible responses in order to mitigate the effects of the problem to the organization and to the employees. The first problem that an organization can encounter when using job-based pay structure is bureaucracy. employees will have, "Why should I do that? It is not in my job description" mindset. Bureaucracy makes employees less flexible and lack of initiative to do jobs not designated to them. The second problem is the structure's hierarchical nature reinforces a top-down decision-making and information flow, as well as status differentials, which do not lend themselves to taking advantage of the skills and knowledge of those closest to production. This means that the skills and knowledge of the employees closest to production will not be maximized because their job description will limit them to do other tasks that matches their skills and abilities. The third problem is that bureaucracy required to generate and update job description and job evaluations can become a barrier to change because wholesale changes to job description can involve a tremendous amount of time and cost. Changing job description may have a negative effect on the productivity of the employees and of the whole organization. In order to make the change effective, the organization needs a lot of time and resources. The fourth problem is that the job-based pay structure may not reward desired behavior, particularly in a rapidly changing environment where the knowledge, skills, and abilities needed yesterday may not be very helpful today and tomorrow. This implies that job-based pay structure constantly adapts to the change of technology and eventually disregards the skills and knowledge of the workers when more improved technology is present. When the skills and knowledge of the employees do not match the present technology, their designated job will be limited and their salary will be lower. Last, the emphasis on job levels and status differentials encourages promotion-seeking behavior but may discourage lateral employee movement because employees are reluctant to accept jobs that are not promotions or that appears to be stepped down. Now, let us proceed to the possible responses to the mentioned problems. An organization can implement delayering. Delayering is a way of reducing the number of job levels within an organization in order to achieve more flexibility in job assignments and in assigning merit increases. These border groupings of jobs are also known as broad bands. One possible disadvantage of delayering and banding is a reduced opportunity for promotion. Therefore, organizations need to consider what they will offer employees instead. Broadband will their greater spread between minimums and maximums can also lead to weaker budgetary control and rising labor costs. On the other hand, the greater spread can permit managers to better recognize high performers with high pay. Can also permit the firm to reward employees for learning. The next possible response of the organization is to adopt the competency-based and skill-based pay structure. Competency-based differs from job-based in a way that the employees are paid for the skills they are capable of using and not for the job they are performing at a particular point in time. This pay structure will encourage employees to gain more knowledge and skills in order to contribute more to the organization and to have higher salary. For skill-based pay structure, employees are paid based on the skills they acquired and are capable of using. Seem to fit well with the increased breadth and depth of skill the changing technology continues to bring. That wraps my report. Thank you and have a good day.